Adrian was just 16, but his world had already been shaped by hardship. He lived with his mother and younger sister in a modest bamboo house in the province, where every day was a struggle to make ends meet. His father had passed away when he was only a child, leaving the family with little more than memories and a dream of a better future. While other kids played basketball or games after school, Adrian would sit outside their home, flute in hand, practicing endlessly. But his instrument wasn't expensive or even new. It was a second-hand piece he had saved up for by doing small chores in the neighborhood. Despite its worn-out look, that flute was his treasure. Every note he played carried his emotions, his longing, his joy, and his sadness. The neighbors would pause in their daily routines whenever they heard him play, because his music touched something deep inside them. "Adrian, when you play, it feels like the wind is singing," one old woman told him. Adrian never had formal lessons. He taught himself from borrowed books, YouTube tutorials, and sheer persistence. Some days, he doubted himself, thinking, what future can a poor boy with a flute have? But his mother always told him, "Son, your gift is your way out of darkness. Never stop." One evening, while browsing on a borrowed phone, Adrian saw an announcement: America's Got Talent auditions were open. His heart raced. The idea seemed impossible. Traveling across the world. Standing in front of thousands. Facing Simon Cowell himself. Yet, something inside whispered, "This is your chance." That night, under the stars, Adrian clutched his flute and made a silent promise: he would chase the dream, no matter how far. The day of the audition finally came. For the first time in his life, Adrian boarded a plane, leaving behind the familiar sounds of his village for the roaring city lights of America. He felt both excitement and fear twisting inside him. His flute, wrapped carefully in cloth, was clutched tightly in his hands, as if it were the only anchor keeping him steady. When his turn came, Adrian walked onto the vast America's Got Talent stage. The spotlight was blinding, the arena filled with thousands of people, and the 4 famous judges sat waiting. His hands trembled. He could almost hear his heart louder than the audience murmurs. Simon Cowell leaned forward, his usual stern face watching closely. "Tell us about yourself," one of the judges asked gently. With a shy smile, Adrian explained, "I'm from the Philippines. I grew up in a small village with my mom and sister. We don't have much, but music is my voice." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. The audience grew quiet, sensing his sincerity. Adrian raised his flute, took a deep breath, and began to play. At first, a soft, haunting melody filled the hall. It was tender, almost fragile, but within seconds, it transformed into something powerful, like a story told without words. His music carried sorrow and hope, love and loss, all woven together in sound. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated. A hush fell across the audience, as if time itself had stopped to listen. By the time Adrian reached the high, soaring notes, his fear was gone. On that stage, in front of the world, he was no longer just a poor boy from a faraway village. He was an artist, pouring his soul into every note. As Adrian's final notes lingered in the air, the auditorium remained frozen in silence. For a heartbeat, it felt as though no one dared breathe, afraid to break the magic that had just been created. Then, slowly, the crowd began to rise, applauding, clapping, and cheering louder with each passing second. The roar of the audience filled the hall, yet all eyes turned to one man, Simon Cowell. Simon, the judge notorious for his sharp critiques and brutally honest remarks, sat still. His arms were no longer folded across his chest. His eyes glistened, and his expression, usually unreadable, was softer, vulnerable. As the camera zoomed in, it revealed what no one expected: Simon Cowell was fighting back tears. For years, viewers had seen him dismiss performances, roll his eyes, or cut contestants off mid-song. But now, something about Adrian's flute had pierced through his guarded exterior. The melody spoke of struggle, of resilience, of dreams carried by a boy thousands of miles away who refused to give up. It was more than music, it was a story, and Simon had heard every word without a single lyric being sung. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, his eyes never leaving Adrian. The judges beside him were already wiping away tears. Heidi Klum whispered, "That was breathtaking." Sofia Vergara nodded, clearly moved. Finally, Simon broke his silence. His voice was low, but it carried across the stage. "Adrian, that was one of the most beautiful performances I have ever witnessed on this stage. You didn't just play the flute, you poured your heart into it. I felt every single note. And that is something rare, something unforgettable." The audience erupted once more, chanting Adrian's name. For the boy who once doubted his worth, this was validation beyond anything he had ever dreamed. The entire theater buzzed with energy, the crowd still on their feet cheering for Adrian. Golden lights shimmered across the stage, but he stood there motionless, clutching his flute, unsure of what would come next. His heart pounded so hard he thought the microphone might pick it up. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, his face still softened by emotion. He looked at Adrian for a long moment, then stood up slowly. The room fell silent again. Simon's voice, usually firm and sometimes cold, carried warmth. "You know, Adrian, music is supposed to move people. What you just did wasn't only music, it was a message, an emotion, a story. And to think you taught yourself, that you came all this way, and stood here with such humility, it's extraordinary." Adrian's eyes brimmed with tears. His mother, watching from backstage, covered her mouth, already crying. The audience erupted in supportive shouts, "Hit the buzzer! Hit the buzzer!" Then it happened. Without another word, Simon reached forward and slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. The iconic sound filled the arena as streams of golden confetti burst into the air, raining down like magic. Adrian dropped his flute in disbelief, covering his face as tears flowed freely. The crowd screamed louder than ever before, clapping, stomping, chanting his name. From backstage, his mother ran onto the stage, hugging him tightly. Both of them stood in the shower of gold, sobbing, holding on to each other as if the world around them had disappeared. Simon smiled, a rare, genuine smile, as he clapped slowly, his eyes still misty. This was no longer just an audition. It was a dream come true. The boy from a small Philippine village had just captured the world's heart. News of Adrian's performance spread like wildfire. Overnight, clips of his audition flooded social media, millions of people sharing the video of the Filipino teenager who played the flute so beautifully that Simon Cowell was moved to tears. Headlines read, "From a village to the world stage," and "Teen's golden buzzer brings hope to millions." Back in his small Philippine village, life was never the same again. Neighbors gathered in front of a single television set, their eyes glued to the screen, cheering and crying as they watched Adrian stand beneath the golden confetti. "That's our boy," shouted one elder proudly. Children who once teased him for playing his flute now tried to imitate him, blowing on homemade instruments, inspired by his courage. Adrian, too, felt the change. He was flown into interviews, invited to music schools, and celebrated not just as a contestant but as a symbol of hope. Yet, through it all, he remained humble. "I didn't play for fame," he told reporters. "I played for my mom, my sister, and every kid who thinks their dream is too big." His mother, still overwhelmed, told the press that she once worried her son's flute was just a distraction from reality. Now, it had become the very bridge to their future. Scholarships and opportunities began to pour in, but what touched Adrian the most were the messages from other young dreamers. "You gave me courage. Because of you, I won't give up." For Adrian, this was only the beginning. He promised himself he would continue to use music to inspire, to heal, and to remind the world that greatness can rise from the humblest places. His story had proved a truth he always believed deep down: dreams have no borders, and music has no limits.